Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me for this online presentation, and it's great to see so many people here today who have joined live, and we'll see some others who are sneaking into the back seats now that I've opened up the waiting room. So we'll get started, and today I want to talk about some of the key leadership trends for 2025. So I've seen some familiar names and faces: Amelia, Kim, Roshan, and a few others as well. And so I know some people have been to my sessions before, but also there's some who haven't. So my 3 rules of engagement for all my presentations, here they are. So the first one is I want to give you some things to think about. So please take the opportunity now to do whatever you can to avoid distractions and interruptions and make the most of this hour that we've got together, and can I invite you to think big. So think bigger than maybe what you would normally do in your regular workday, because it's easy to do that and then step back when life gets in the way than the other way around. The second thing is be playful. So we are recording this, and I'll send the recording out to everyone who's here, but also everyone who's registered. So if you're only watching the recording, hello to you. You won't get as much from this hour as the people who are here live. So if you're here live, make the most of the opportunities to engage, not just with me, but with other people in the room as well. If you're not familiar with Zoom, there's some really cool tools that you can use. So we're going to use the chat room quite a lot, but also we'll use the reaction emojis. So you'll see at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's the reaction emojis. And can I ask you now, let's put this to the test. How are you feeling about 2025? Use one of the emojis there to tell the room how you're feeling about 2025. I'd like to know. Okay, there's a few open mouth amazement. Okay, thumbs up. Good, fantastic. Good. So, okay, so some people have got a bit of a grimace there. Excellent. Okay, so great to see. So there's a mix of feelings about 2025, and I want to help you with some of those, with a look at some of the leadership trends. And also, please feel free to use the emojis as we go through the hour, because then everyone, we see kind of the sentiment in the room. So anytime you want to press one of the emojis, please do that, and it'll just come up. It won't interrupt me or anybody else, but it'll just come up on the screen. The third thing, on a more serious note, is I'd love you to get some really practical actions that you're going to take away and put into place, ideally today, in the next week, and certainly leading into the rest of the year. So at the start of every year, I do some research and I publish this special report about leadership trends for the year ahead. And this is the latest one. You can get it on my website. In fact, let me give you now I'll give you the link in the chat where you can download it. You don't need it now, and that link is a permanent link, so you can download it at any time. But I can give you the 10 in that report, and we're not going to cover all 10 of them now. Today, because it just doesn't make sense to try and cover 10 trends in an hour. So what I'm doing is today I've picked 3 of them, and we're going to focus on these 3 trends. So some of them that we're not going to cover, let me just quickly show you some of the things we're not going to cover, but are in the report. So we won't really look at AI today. Or human-machine collaboration, because we seem to have got past the whole technology amazement, and now we're looking at how to use it in our workplaces. So we're not going to do that today, only because I do a lot of that in other areas. So if you follow me, you'll get lots of other information about AI. If you're interested in DeepSeek, the AI app that was launched, a Chinese app that was launched recently, watch this space. I'm talking about that in my newsletter next week. But there's plenty of other information about AI from me and others elsewhere, so I won't cover that today. We won't look at cybersecurity. It's a really important topic, and I think security is everybody's responsibility, not just IT's. But again, it's a little bit of a niche topic, so we won't go into that today. But it's obviously something that needs to be tackled at an organizational level and a team level. Another really big topic, which we won't cover today, is around sustainability. Again, it's a big topic, and it's one that I wanted to cover, but I had to narrow it down so that we can get enough value from the 3 that we look at. So that one's not there either. But again, this and all the others are in the list. So the three that we are going to cover are around three different people or groups of people in your organization. So the first one is customers. So there's a trend that's related to how you deal with your customers, clients, or other external stakeholders. The next one is about your team members. So how you deal with your employees or staff. And the third one is about the most important person in the organization, which is you. Okay, so that's our agenda for today as we go. So there'll be an opportunity I'll stop for questions along the way. Feel free to ask questions in the chat. I'll ask you questions, engage in the chat, and there might be some other ways to engage as well. Okay, so let's look at this first area around your customers. And I've often said to people in my role as a futurist, when people say to me, what's the most important thing we need to be thinking about in our business or in our organization, I always say the most important thing you can do is make sure you understand the problems you're solving for your customers or the goals you're helping them achieve. Okay, and that's still the case. I haven't wavered from that. I want to ask you now a slightly different question, which is also about problems for customers, but it's the problems that you can't solve or you don't solve or you don't want to solve. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to think about, what problems you solve for your customers. I hope you know. I shouldn't necessarily assume that, because many organizations get to the point where they get so focused on what's happening internally and on their everyday work that they forget about the fact that they're supposed to be solving problems for customers. But let's assume you know that. I'd like you now to think about the problems you don't solve. So let me give you three questions to get your mind thinking around them. You might think they're three variations of the same question, but they're actually tackling it from three different angles. So I'm going to ask you the question, and then I'll give you a minute. I'll have a minute of silence while I stop talking, difficult for a speaker, and I'll ask you to write down for yourself what problems you don't solve. So let me give you the questions. And I'll explain this with my business as an example. So the question is, what problems don't you solve for your customers? So for me, I do a lot of conference speaking, and quite often clients say to me, you're going to be there, you're opening the conference with your keynote presentation, will you MC the conference as well? And I say, no, I don't do that. There are people who are really good MCs. Let me recommend 2 or 3 names for you, and I think you should do that. Get them, because that's a specialist skill. So it's a problem that I've chosen not to solve for a client who's engaging me for something else. The next one is related. What problems can't you solve? So I feel like my MC skills, I haven't built them up, and I guess I could. But another thing that people ask me with AI, for example, I speak a lot about AI, and sometimes people ask me about coming into their organization and helping their IT team, or actually providing some of the IT help to help them build AI. And I say, I don't do that in my business. I haven't set up my business for that. You need people who are dedicated, who are right on top of the latest IT, and who are available 24/7 for support when you need it. And my business just doesn't do that, so I can't solve that. Another angle is, who do you turn away? So are there customers or clients who come to you, but you say, actually, no, I don't do that. Again, you can see they're variations of a theme. So for example, I do a lot of work with schools, but when I work with schools, I talk to principals, deputy principals, staff, so leaders and also staff. I don't talk to students. My presentations, I just haven't arranged or got the skill of being able to speak to student groups. And again, I can refer them to other people who are really good at working with students and speaking to students and speaking at student events. I'm not. Okay, so they're customers that I turn away if they want me to come in and speak to their school group, to the students. Okay, so I'm going to give you a minute to write down for yourself what problems you don't solve, and I'm going to, given that Amelia has jumped in with the chat, you're welcome to share it in the chat if you want to, but here's one example. We don't solve anything that doesn't require legal advice. Amelia is one of our clients, and so don't do non-legal consulting. Okay, so that's the sort of thing that you're looking for, that I'm looking for from you in this minute. You're welcome to share it in the chat if you want to, but equally, you're welcome to just keep it to yourself. Okay, I'll give you a minute. Okay, thank you for doing that. And people have preempted me already. If you'd like to type in the chat the problems you don't solve, you're welcome to do that. Let me just share a couple. Graham said subjects outside my area of expertise. So Graham, there's you've got great expertise and very broad expertise, but there are things that you choose not to do. And there may be things that your customers and clients are asking for. Steve, data analytics company, can interpret but acknowledge that you don't get the full story without context. Yeah. So Ray, yes, business case for projects, finance, staffing. So again, I know the sort of work that Ray does, but there's specific areas of business consulting that Ray doesn't do. Yep, don't align with values. So in this case, Graham, the one that don't align with values, in this case, what I'm about to get to won't apply in this particular situation, because we're going to look at now how you can solve those problems by doing, well, I'll tell you what we're by doing. Okay, but in this case, you might choose never to work with them. Yeah, client issues outside our service offering, out of scope. Kaiser, yep, another client of mine, problems outside our core expertise. Yeah, exactly. And I know the business, and I won't say because Kaiser hasn't shared that. Yeah, so Steve, yes, so you've got internal customers, internal clients, and you work in the support area as a business manager, and but you're not adding value to curriculum and teaching. Same with me, by the way. So whenever I talk to staff, principals, leaders, and other staff, I say, look, don't ask me about pedagogy because that's not my expertise in curriculum and learning, but I can talk to you about leadership and team and culture and so on. Okay, excellent, good. Thank you for doing that so quickly, by the way. Okay, so the reason I asked you to do that is because the trend I want to talk about is this idea of cross-industry collaboration. It's something that has been around for decades now, but it's become even more important now, and that's why it's risen to one of the top 10, is because our world has become so much more complex, things are so much more interconnected, customers and clients are much more demanding that they're expecting you to solve more problems for them. And if you don't, that's okay. You don't have to do it, but there are more opportunities now for you to partner with other organizations who can help solve those problems that you choose not to solve or you can't solve, or even customers that you turn away. So let me give you some examples that are happening right here in Australia, and then I'll ask you to think of ways that perhaps you could partner with somebody to solve your customers or clients' problems. So here's an example. Woolies, which prides itself on being the fresh food people. As a result of that, they quite often throw away fruit and veg, which aren't, well, still edible, but they won't have it super fresh. And now they partner with Oz Harvest, who can then distribute that food to people in need without it being wasted. Okay, it's a simple partnership. Coles has a similar partnership with another organisation. The Royal Flying Doctor Service and Telstra are working to provide telehealth services around Australia. You know, the flying doctors have been around for more than 100 years now, but especially in the last few years, the last decade or so, they've been really working at telehealth to provide the best quality medical services for regional Australia, where they can't necessarily get to a major city or a major regional centre. And the key, as the technology keeps improving, the RFDS is able to offer more and more services to regional Australians. This is a finance example. So Good Shepherd Microfinance does micro loans, so customers who want very small loans, and the big banks won't touch them, not because they're risky, but because of all the bureaucracy and the paperwork and everything, the governance and regulation that goes around it. It's very difficult for them to service and serve those smaller customers. So NAB, National Australia Bank, has partnered with Good Shepherd Microfinance, and together they're able to offer those microfinance loans, microloans. Here's another example. Mitsubishi and BHP are partnering to make the steel making process more sustainable. It's not one or the other doing it independently. They're working together for that. And they're different parts of the supply chain, and they're partnering together. Okay, so I'll ask you again, that if you look at your list of the problems you don't solve, you can't solve, or the people you turn away, how could this apply to you? I'll give you another minute to do that. And again, feel free to share in the chat. And can I invite you, as you do this, don't get too caught up in whether this is part of our strategic plan or whether this be too expensive or whether we just don't know who the partners are. Be open-minded about the possibilities, and then you may need to narrow it down if you decide to put it into your plan. So you're not committing to it, you're just looking for opportunities. Okay, I'll give you a minute. Okay, thank you. Okay, so let me just see what people are sharing here, and I'll share them, bring them up on the screen. You can see them in the chat, but let's look at, so Kaiser again, a mining tech company providing sensors. Yes, I know the Kaiser's industry, and there's a lot of sensors being used in that industry, which I won't say what it is because she hasn't, for predictive maintenance. Yeah, absolutely. And actually, predictive maintenance works for lots and lots of different industries as well. Yeah, Graham. Okay, so Graham, you and I both do this. So where we can't solve a problem or don't solve a problem, rather than just say no, we'll say to our clients, look, here's somebody else who can solve that problem. Some people even take that to the next level where they create formal or informal referral agreements, and there's money changes hands. I don't think Graham does, but sorry, I shouldn't speak for you, Graham. But that's okay. You're solving the problem, whether you do that or not. Yeah, Dr. Kathleen Franklin. Yeah, external working groups, right, for volunteering expertise and build up skills and so on. Yeah, absolutely. And again, I know the work that Kathleen does. Amelia, partnering with universities. Fantastic. This might even come up a little bit later as well. Nancy, furniture retailer, could partner with an interior design company. So when I got my kitchen renovated some years ago, about 13 years ago now, I got an IKEA kitchen, and IKEA also has a service working with designers where they contract out work to designers for newbies like I who have no idea about design, and that was a really fantastic service, really useful service. Good, thank you. Can I recommend that you do continue to think of opportunities to collaborate, and especially this idea of cross-industry collaboration is becoming much more important now, and it's becoming much more feasible and practical because we've got such a connected world. So for us being in Australia, being girt by sea has been a huge advantage for a lot of our history, but now we're no longer, that girt by sea doesn't count for as much in terms of creating barriers, and in fact it opens up other opportunities. Okay, good. Let's move on to the next one. The next one, this is my favorite area because it's about team and team culture, and what's happening with teams and how they're changing in the workplace. So let me tell you a story. I did a 2-day workshop with senior leaders here in Perth in September, and we were talking about team members and how different generations have different attitudes towards the work. And one of the senior leaders related the story about a new recruit that she hired, and was really smart, savvy person, and had this view that she was really fast at doing her work, but at the end of the working day she would leave. Okay, whether that job had been complete or not, or if she was able to stay and asked to stay for an extra half hour, she'd say, okay, boss, that's fine. I'll just let you know I'll be in half an hour late tomorrow. Okay, and you may have seen, or you may know people like that. In fact, when I asked people to send me questions about the biggest challenges they're having as leaders ahead of this presentation, three people sent me a similar thing to that, sent me a similar story. Okay, so let me ask you to complete this sentence. I'll tell you what that leader said. So my younger staff have a completely different attitude towards what? Towards what? What do you think? Just type in the chat. It might be true for your staff or what you might speculate for other people. Yeah, sense of urgency, completely different attitudes towards work, work-life balance, career. Yeah, so what this leader actually said, she started the sentence and said, let me give you a couple of others, going over and above. Work habit, times and flexibility, dealing directly with people. I know that's a bugbear of yours, Graham. Work hours. Yeah, and we're going to come to this. Okay, so actually when this person in my workshop said this, she said, my younger staff have a completely different attitude to it. And I said, oh, what? Do you mean like wage theft? Okay, and like we wasn't at the start of the workshop, so we built rapport with the group, so they all laughed about it. But when you think about it, that is a different attitude. So what she was saying is they have a different attitude towards motivation and dedication to the job. And that is true, and that's what I grew up with, and many leaders and managers have grown up with. But there are changes now, and people think differently. So the trend is that we've got changing workforce demographics to the extent that we've got maybe up to 5 generations of workers in your workplace. So from the oldest, the baby boomers, the most senior people in the organization, typically Gen Xers, people like me, and I know some of the people in the room are Gen Xers, and some of them are senior managers, and some of them are even thinking of retiring. I was surprised to find, talking to some of my uni friends that I went to uni with, 3 of them who did a computer science degree with me have retired now. That's amazing to me. The Gen Ys, or the millennials, are the next group down. They're the ones that we used to think of as crazy young people, but they're the oldest of them are in their 40s, so they're also managers. The Gen Zs are the next group down. Their oldest is 25, and they're the ones who are going to be really disrupting our workplaces. They're going to be 30% of the workforce globally and in Australia by 2030, so in the next 5 years. And then you might even have Gen Alphas in your workforce. So these are younger people, these are teenagers, often still at school, but many organizations are employing apprentices or even staff members who are at that age, who are still school age. Okay, so what does it mean? So my favorite generation is Gen Z. So I love them. I don't have kids, but I've got 3 nibblings, so 2 nieces and a nephew. And I've also got 2 stepkids who are, and of those 5, 4 of them are Gen Z, and I love them. They're futurists, and I love the way that they think differently about life and work and the world. So let me share with you here some of the phrases that Gen Zs are using around work, and I'm going to ask you to type in the chat what you think this phrase means. Okay, so let's just do it quickly. I've got a few of them for you. So the first one is quiet quitting. You might have heard about it. What do you think that means? Disengaged, disengagement. A couple of people have said this, doing the bare minimum, keeping a low profile, just having enough. It is actually the whole idea of doing the bare minimum. Okay, so quiet quitting, why are they calling it quitting? Quitting is just what the employers call it. Quiet quitting is doing what you're being paid to do and nothing else. And employers were up in arms a few years ago when this phrase first became popular. I'm going, what's this like? This is like buying an economy class ticket and thinking that you can sit in a business class seat. And that we as employers were upset about that. And Gen Zs are going, well, this is what you're paying me to do. Okay, let me do the next one. This is one that you might have come across, career cushioning. You may not have heard of the phrase, but it's have a guess. By the way, Graham, this one, quitting the job without providing an explanation, there's a word for that. It's called revenge quitting. which is a much more ruthless version of that. Career cushioning is extra quals. Yeah, kind of, Steve. So it's really saying that as you work in your main job, you're also building up skills and building up opportunities that will help you on your next step in your career progression. Most career coaches and advisors will say that's what you should be doing anyway. Okay, so it's not a new thing. It's just that you're looking for things like extra skills, like certificates, which will help qualifications for your next job. Prepare for transition. Exactly right. Okay, the next one is a different name to something that we used to call something else, polywork. And Kim's come across this when I shared it elsewhere. Polywork is, multiple jobs. Exactly right, Amelia. So we used to call it moonlighting, right? The idea that you would work in your main job during the day. It used to be 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And then later, you'd have another job. And especially now, you have these Gen Zs who are using exactly the word that Carolyn said I was about to say, doing side hustles. And it's much easier now, especially for them to do that online. Here's another one. I'm going to choose it. I'm including this one because it was, I think it came from Australia. There's a marketing company with their staff coming back from COVID and all the stress and the mental health issues. Bare minimum Mondays. I think you can probably guess what that is. Steve's called it quasi-long weekend. Exactly. Okay, so this is the idea that you ease into the week by having your Monday doing low effort jobs, easy jobs. Okay, so and this is actually, this company was encouraging their staff to have bare minimum Mondays so that they could ease into the week, and because they were coming out of lockdowns, they had the issues of high cost of living and so on. They said, let's just ease into the week. We used to do this as well. Okay, and maybe you still do, except we used to have bare minimum Fridays. You probably remember, you may have worked in some organizations where Friday lunchtime, nothing got done after that point. Okay, so it's not a new idea, it's just a different way of looking at work. Let me give you one other. The last one here is the workfluencer. What's the workfluencer? What do you think the workfluencer is? And actually for employers, this is good and bad, or could be good and bad, depending on your culture. Okay, so the workfluencer is, it's kind of related to what you're saying here, Amelia. Using work for social media presence is actually combining work, talking about work on social media. Okay, so it's not only in the workplace. So someone who's a big personality and voice in the workplace, not only in the workplace, but they will share what they're doing at work and about their work life online on social media. And this is great if you've got a fantastic culture and you've got your enthusiastic Gen Z workers in there sharing all the great things that they're doing and with their friends and the people that follow them. That's fantastic. And they're not necessarily even doing it to build a side hustle. They're just doing it to share. Because they're going to encourage their friends to apply for jobs there, and if you've got great people working for you, then wouldn't you like to have more of them? If you've got a bad culture, exactly the same thing happens, but in a negative way. So and let's forget about whether there are rules and regulations and HR policies about whether you can talk about work on social media, but workfluencers can be one of your most powerful tools, as well as they could be some of your biggest enemies. Okay, I want to show you now some actual examples from around the world of people who are taking advantage of the diversity in those demographics. So I've looked at Gen Zs because they're the favorite generation and they're the ones who are disrupting our workplace the most. But here are some examples from around the world of organizations who are taking advantage and leveraging the diversity rather than just saying, we've got a diverse workforce, we need to deal with it. How can we take advantage of it? Okay, Siemens, a German company but global, they are making sure that people can retire to transition into retirement rather than just on one day they say, I'm retired, give you a gold watch and see you later. Because what we're finding now in our workplaces is that some people who are planning to retire are having to put off their retirement to a future date because they can't afford to retire because of higher costs of living, rising inflation, their kids and grandkids moving into home, and they're also emptying the fridge every day or every week. So there are increasing costs. So that's good and bad for organizations. It's great because you get to keep that wisdom and expertise within the organization, but it's also bad because that creates a bottleneck, and those younger employees who are looking to more senior roles for their career progression, they get frustrated and they either stay and grumble or they leave. Okay, so Siemens is looking to transition people into retirement. Capgemini is a French insurance company, and they do reverse mentoring where the more senior person mentors the more junior person. I love reverse mentoring. We won't go into it in a lot of detail today, but it's a fantastic thing to look at for your team if you've got, for you as a manager and leader, if you've got really smart, savvy Gen Zs in your team. Tata as a consultant in India, what they're doing is they're helping women who've taken a career break because of maternity leave or for other reasons, help them back into the workforce. So rather than just allowing it, they're saying we've got some really smart, talented people here. We don't want to lose them and we want to get them real value out of them. So let's create these plans to help them back into the workforce. Huawei in China, they are deliberately creating cross-cultural teams so that they can tap into and leverage that cultural diversity as well. And here in Australia, the last example is Telstra. They have for years now, they've had these multi-year paid internships for Indigenous uni students, again, to build that diversity. Okay, our time's going really well. So what I'm going to ask you to do now, you've heard a lot from me. You've shared some things in the chat. What I'm going to do is let's have a little breakout session. And I'm going to ask you, looking at this trend of having multiple generations in the workplace and in your workforce, how we talk to other people. We're going to break into breakout rooms in a few seconds. And I'm going to ask you to either share one or two things. One of two things or one or two things. Either you can say, introduce yourself, say where you're from. Don't spend too much time on that because otherwise you'll run out of time. And then say either we're doing this in our workplace so that other people in the room will learn from it, or that's interesting. I now think, hearing from Gihan, here's something that we could do in our workplace. Okay, welcome back everyone. Great to see you back. Okay, let's. I want to get a little bit of feedback very quickly on what you found, or an idea that you've got or that you're using. So what I'd like you to do is type in the chat in one or two words an idea that you got. Don't make it very long because it won't register. So if you say reverse mentoring, type in reverse mentoring. Okay, but don't go, I'm going to look for a Gen Z and make them my reverse mentor. Just type in the chat. Let's see. Thank you, Lynn. Reverse mentoring. What else? So I love seeing reverse mentoring. Because I think the thing with reverse mentoring while people are typing is that you don't need permission to do it. You just go and talk to somebody and say, hey, let's have a coffee. I'd like to run an idea by you. You don't make it a big 3-month program. You have the chat. If you think, I'd like to invite them to be my mentor for the next 6 months or 3 months, then invite them for another chat and so on. If you don't, you just go, thanks for the coffee. Love your input, and leave it like that. So what else is coming up? Yeah, intentionally speaking to others, yeah. Can't force culture, yeah. Yeah, so a few people are saying you can't force culture. You can't, but you can facilitate change. So one of the other questions that came through before this session, that when I asked people for challenges that they're facing, one of them said, we can't recruit people who can think independently and can problem solve by themselves. And I wonder also for that person who I don't know, whether they have got a culture of people thinking independently, solving problems for themselves and being nurtured and rewarded for doing that, or do they have a culture that stick to the rules? Yeah, like generation mentor groups as well. Good, thank you. Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so time's going well, so I'm going to do one other thing that I had as a backup, which I was going to skip if we didn't have time, but we do have time. So we'll do this. We'll do a little bit of it's kind of a poll, but it's like 10 questions, and I'd like you to give yourself a score of 1 to 10. I'm going to ask you to classify yourself according to these 10 criteria. Okay, so we'll do it quickly. I'm not asking you to share in the chat, but at the end, I'll ask you to share your score, and we'll see what the scores are. Okay, some people will recognize this already. Okay, so if you are white, give yourself a score of 1. If you're not, it's a 0. If you're male, that counts as 1. If you're heterosexual, that counts as 1. If you're cisgender versus transgender, then give yourself a score of 1. So people in chemistry will know cisgender, the difference between cis and trans. So cis is where your biological sex organs match your gender identity, and trans is where they're on the opposite side. Okay, they're opposite. So cis versus trans, cis and trans. If you're born before 1980, this counts as a 1. If you are Christian or non-religious, that counts as 1. Okay, keep tabs, keep your score. If you own property, including your own home, that counts as 1. If you can speak English goodly, that counts as 1. If you've got a uni degree, that counts as 1. And if you're able-bodied, that counts as 1. Okay, so you should have a score. I'm going to ask you now in the chat, will you please type in the score that you got, and we'll see what the results are. See what the average is. Okay, so this doesn't surprise me. Okay, it doesn't surprise me that we've got an average of 8 or 9 or 10. So whenever I've done this with senior groups or leadership groups, it's not surprising that we get numbers like this. So this is about privilege for people who haven't got that yet, and I'm not sure many people here have already figured this out. So privilege is an unearned advantage, and the thing with privilege is it gives you a head start. It doesn't mean that you don't have to work hard and you didn't work hard, but it gives you a head start. So all of these things here that we saw are things around privilege. So I didn't choose that I was born able-bodied. Like I did work really hard for my uni degree, but I was in a position where my parents could support me to allow me to study. I was also one of the last groups of people who got free university education in Australia, and after that, you had to pay, and there's debts that are accumulated. You can speak English fluently. It gives you an advantage. If you own property, like I worked really hard to buy the house that I live in, and of course you have to work hard for that, but it was a lot easier if you were born before 1980. It's become a lot harder now. If you're Christian or if you're Christian, then by happy coincidence, your main feast days happen to be public holidays. If you're some other religion, then if you want to observe them, then you have to take extra time off and so on. So all of these things give you an advantage. So I think of it as like if you're running a race, if you're running a 100-meter race, every point that you accumulated gives you a 10-meter head start. So for me as well, everyone except for the first really obvious one, so I scored 9 out of 10 as well. And I reckon if I was running a 100-meter race and I had a 90-meter head start on Usain Bolt, I think I'll probably still win. Okay, so this is what privilege gives us. And the reason I'm bringing this up before we end this section about employees and teams is, again, especially with the Gen Zs, like Gen Zs will score high on many of those areas, but not all of them. And there are a lot of people who go, toughen up, harden up. This is really important. You just need to, when I was young, this is what life was like. And it's not necessarily true anymore. Okay, comments. Kim, thank you. Explanation of privilege. And Graham, exactly the point I was going to make as well. So it's a world and a marketplace that's mostly not like us. And one of the other things with particularly Gen Zs is that they don't only advocate for people like them. Okay, so you'll see Gen Zs who are advocating for people who are LGBTQI, even if they're not. They're Gen Zs who advocate for Indigenous people, even if they're not. This is much more than it used to be. So it used to be like, for me, I'm a migrant from South Asia, so there are a lot of people who would advocate for South Asian migration and that sort of thing. So you advocate for your own group, but that's no longer the case with Gen Zs. They've got a much more global view, and they are much stronger in advocating for other groups. And again, that this is not a political speech, but it's just being aware of what's happening in our world now and the people in your team. Okay, so the third area, which is all about you, this is one thing around you, so we won't spend as much time as we did around your team, but this is a really important trend. And I'll lead into this by sharing the part of the research that I did for the Trends report. Is you may know that Gallup every year does a survey, employee engagement survey, about the state of the global workplace. And they come up with a number of things. You can download the Gallup report and you can see some of the stats from there. I'm going to share one of them with you. In fact, we're going to do this as a poll. Okay, so this is just a basic ABCD poll. So the question that Gallup asked, or the stat that came out of the research, the question I'm asking you, is what factor accounts for the biggest difference in team employee engagement? In other words, what's the biggest contributor that determines whether a team is not engaged versus highly engaged? So the four options: psychological safety, as you can see there, the activity and the approach of the managers and leaders. Is it having a diverse team, or is it about flexible work? So we'll see the scores as they're coming in. So if you're putting in words, they won't count, so put in A, B, C, or D, and that'll count in the poll. Good. Okay, so most people got the right answer. 75% of people said it was the managers, and that is correct. So that's the correct answer. So most of the biggest factor around whether your team's engaged or not is you. It's really up to you. So the first person to get that right, so it was Nancy. Congratulations, Nancy. So it's interesting, right? It's really interesting that the biggest factor around employee engagement is the leader. So this is why leadership matters so much. And in fact, as Kim's already said and noted in the chat, it was 70% of the contribution to an employee engagement is due to the manager. Okay, so you're a big factor. So the trend for leaders is people are expecting in workplaces more authentic and transparent leadership. And Steve, you're exactly right. The term manager could or may or may not be replaced by leader, and I agree. I use them interchangeably. Some people always want to use the word manager. Some people always want to use the word leader. Kathleen says, yep, absolutely, Kathleen. So that's right. So managers influence, big influence on psychological safety. Got a whole other session around that, but we won't go into that now. Yep. Okay, so what we're looking for are authentic and transparent leaders. So let's do a little exercise here. This is an exercise around, well, I won't say what it's around because I'll ask you to answer, and then we'll see what it's around. Reed Hastings, the CEO of Netflix, wrote this book, No Rules Rules. I'm sure there are people in the room who've read this. And in the book, he was asked by his co-author, Erin Mayer, a series of questions about some hypothetical scenarios in the workplace. And she said, if this happened, what would you do? And he answered. So I'm going to give you 3 of those scenarios. Let's see what you do in the chat, and then I'll tell you what Reed Hastings answered for all of them. Not saying he's the best leader on earth, but you'll see a pattern in his answers. Okay, so the first one here. The first one is you're the CEO of a company, you're about to go public, an IPO or a public launch, and you've always been transparent in sharing your quarterly earnings with staff. You've been completely transparent, but if you do it now and there's a leak, then your stock could crash, the launch could fail, and maybe even somebody could go to jail. So what do you do in this situation where there's time to release the numbers, but there's also this IPO coming up in the near future, there's launch coming up in the near future? What do you do? Type in the chat, please. Peter says share. Steve says share. Len says don't. Cassie says share. Graham says don't. If you've always done it, keep doing it. Give them the option. Yep, hold off until they launch. Okay, so I won't give you the Reed Hastings answers just yet. Let me give you the two other scenarios first. Here's another scenario. The next one is that there's going to be an organizational restructure and some people could lose their jobs. But that organizational restructure is only a 50-50. And if it doesn't go ahead, everyone's going to be fine. So do you tell your team now or do you wait until you're certain? Interesting. So okay, there seems to be a mix of this. So let me actually do it a different way then. Let me ask you, just type in the chat. So if the question is, do you tell your team now? Type in yes or no in the chat, please. There's a lot of yeses, some no's. Okay, so it seems about, yeah, 60-40. Okay, interesting. Okay, thank you for doing that. Thought I'd just do it a different way because it seemed to be a mixed result there. Okay, let me go back to the third one, and then I'll give you the answers from Reed Hastings. So, you've had a pretty bad run with hiring managers, like managers within your team or leaders within your team. And you realize on reflection that this was actually your poor judgment. It wasn't about the people themselves. It's just your poor judgment in finding the right people to fit within the values of the team. So do you admit this to the rest of your team or not? Let's do this a yes or no again, because I think the answer, I'm pretty sure I'm guessing what people are going to say. So let's do this as yes or no. Okay, 100% yes for that. Okay. I even saw, oh, hell yeah. Yeah, used as a learning moment. Okay, excellent. Thank you, everyone. So let me tell you what Reed Hastings said. So for the first situation, you go in public, do you share it or not? Do you share the results? He says, yes, trust them, share it. And in fact, somebody said what his advice was, share it and make sure that they're aware of the consequences of leaking it more so than ever before, than in the past. The second situation where you've got an organizational restructure, do you tell them or not? And he says, yep, trust them, tell them, because you care about them as people, not only as employees. And even if some of them are making plans about going somewhere else and they might jump ship early, it's your job to demonstrate your transparency by being transparent even in difficult situations. And the third one, and everyone here said yes as well, we should do it. So here's again, he says, yeah, trust them and tell them, admit it. And this is also about being authentic. So for yourself, I'm going to give you a minute to write down for yourself and share in the chat if you want to, but don't feel you have to. How could you, as a leader, be more authentic or more transparent or both? Okay, so I'll give you a minute. Okay, thank you. Let me share what people are saying. You can see them in the chat already, but let me share a couple of them. So, Peter, I already wear my heart and yes on my sleeve. Lucky team. Yeah, Amelia, provide more context, right, so that they can understand the reason for decisions. Show more empathy. Graham says, the only way to grow trust is to trust. Absolutely right. Trust works it's not just a one-way street. Yeah, so it's an interesting one, Steve. So in your view, where's the line for confidentiality and keeping it quiet? So again, it depends on the culture of the team culture that you've already built. There are also obviously some regulations around that, around confidentiality, and you may have organizational policies in your school, in your organization. Steve works in a school, in your organization around that. And the more trust you have, the less you have to rely on policies, and the more that you can operate using guidelines rather than policies. So it is like, it's not a yes or a no. It's not a black and white or 0 or 1. It's a spectrum. Yeah, share plans. Graham's empathy is leadership quality number 1. Yeah, more consultation with staff. By the way, Kathleen Franklin, who's Dr. Franklin, who's here on the call today, she's a very good friend of mine, and I remember many, like I've known her for a long, long time, and many years ago we were like reading some management books and looking at management quizzes and things, and Kathleen, you probably remember these sort of things came up. Can I say how long we've been friends? More than 30 years. So some of these things we've been talking about for more than 30 years, for more than generations. And they're just as important now. They've just come up in priority because our world has become more transparent and more connected. So if you betray trust, if you do things that your organization, within your organization, that other organizations aren't doing, people see it. People have much more access to hierarchy. People in the traditional hierarchy, you didn't have access to many people, but now you do. So that's why this is one of the top leadership trends right now. Okay, so we talked about 3 things here. We've talked about the customers with cross-industry collaboration. We talked about your team with the change in workforce demographics. And we talked about you as a leader being more authentic and transparent as a leader. I know there's some HR people here as well. So of course, a lot of these things cross boundaries, not just within individual teams, but across HR and other areas of leadership as well. Again, if you'd like to get the report, it's just freely available on my website. It goes into the others. So we've covered 3 of those trends here today. So before I finish, one of my favorite quotations that I often finish my presentations with says, in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice there is. So I often share that a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but I think there's some real value to that as well. One of my favorite mentoring consulting clients, who's now retired, Dr. Nikki Howe, I loved working with her because every time we had a mentoring session, within 24 hours, she'd ring me up or she'd send me an email going, hey, Gihan, I tried this. Tell me what you think and tell me how I can make it better. She put things into action straight away. So can I ask you to don't wait for the world to get ready for you. Don't wait for things to slow down. Don't wait till you got your ducks lined up in a row. Start before you're ready, because that's the best way to be fit for the future. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for engaging. Send out the recording as usual and have a great day. Bye for now.